Hello, I'm Chris, the Tabletop Fox, and welcome to my video on Halo Flashpoint. In this series, we'll be having a look at the Banished faction, and going through their units and seeing how they're performing in Season 1. In this video... What was that? Anyway, in this video, I'm going to be looking at the Elites, or as they're named in the game, Sangheili Mercenaries. So, the Elites initially came out alongside the Spartans in the Spartan edition as they snuck in, and they became a menace in the draft format because having 4 Elites with plasma grenades, 1 with a sword, maybe 2 with a sword, in draft was a bit strong, let's just say, when all the other units in the game just had their base weapon at the start. However, when we hit Season 0, the Elites did have quite the hefty costs put on them because of this. And it was felt, and people didn't really play them as much because of that, while we had some diehards, including some people in Rules Committee, who still swear by them and would make them work. And they were good units to run, and they have done well. They may not have got many wins, but they were very bad to go against when you weren't used to it. And now in Season 1, they have got a form of tack now from the brute friends that came with the Banished box. And overall, the Elites are a good unit. But let's get into why that is. The Elites have an amazing baseline. They have a 2-3 movement, a 4 shoot, 4 fight, and a 4 save, alongside then having 1 armor, 3 shields, and 3 health. So, when looking at that, people will see it and think quite fragile compared to Spartans. Yes and no. That 4-up save does a lot. Add in that they have a keyword called evade, which makes shooting them a bit of a risky prospect, so people might be a bit avoidant or go doubling down and put a lot more into them than they might need to. And that does mean they do actually survive quite well. Alongside 3 shields can be either very difficult to clear or very easy. If you're using traditional Deadeye, for example, probably with a DMR and a Covenant carbine, it can be semi-difficult because neither of those have ESD. However, if you're using a Gunganir with a plasma launcher or a grenade launcher with the EMP profile, for example, then it becomes a fair bit easier to clear those shields, though a bit lucky when it comes to the plasma. So they are relatively tough units, surprisingly, because of that. And they're very fast units. And they're very good at shooting and fighting as units. So overall, very solid. So what else is there that makes them so good that they don't get taken that much? Well, touch back on evade. Evade is if you are not killed, pinned, or knocked back by a shoot action that targets you. And that can, funny enough, include if a grenade scatters into you and then fails to pin or scatter you. What this lets you do when this occurs is you can then advance 1 cube in any direction. So, especially if you're, say, a melee elite with a sword, this means you can maybe evade into an opponent and then get free fight on them in their own activation. And this is where shooting an elite from point blank range is a bit risky. Or shooting one that's near one of your allies. It could also mean they get extra movement towards you, ready for the next turn, should they survive. Or they could hide behind cover with that evade, or they can get onto an objective that they couldn't have got onto before. There's a lot to it. And then what we also have is a special order that's very specific to elites, and that is reinforcements. Now what reinforcements allows is if an elite is dead and it has activated that round, you can spend a special order dice to unactivate that elite, which means you can then bring it back. This is very powerful because it means you get the equivalent of having an extra unit for that round, but also it means that you can guarantee, unless you're playing against other elite players who have got reinforcements, that you will have the last activation, because you can use this order after any activation ends. So you can wait until the last activation of the round, by your opponent possibly, use this order, unactivate when you're elite and go, and then steal the hill in King of the Hill, steal the extraction zone in extraction, There are so many uses for this, and it is why it's a very strong order, and why if they have a special order dice, it is incredibly scary to kill an elite. So why don't they get taken more? One of the reasons is they're hard to play, just to put that out there straight away. Spartans are relatively easy. If you are competent with them, you won't have too many problems. Unless you're quite good with elites, you can have major struggles. And that is partly also because they have less resources than Spartans. I said about their reinforcements being incredibly strong. It is. However, they haven't got tack built into many of their units. In regards to the elites themselves currently, they haven't got tack at all. They must acquire the services of a brute chosen warrior or a brute captain to get attack. And then it somewhat changes up their dynamic a bit, because now you haven't got 3, maybe 4 fast elite boys running around. You've got likely 2 and a slower, tougher brute. And that is a playstyle that is difficult to initially pick up, especially when you're used to fast Spartans and fast elites at that. That's 2 of the reasons, and then the third is why I said about 3 is they're expensive as units. So a sword elite is 47 points. Now in truth that's the same as a CQB with a sword, but the sword elite's quite a bit better than a CQB with a sword. But on the other hand, the CQB on the sword has a lot more support, and then they also have the ODSTs giving really cheap points to help with the allowance. Elites don't have that. The cheapest they have is some brutes at like about 32 points, but those brutes are not that useful for them. It'd actually be better to go with less models, aka going with a 3-man team, and which is where elites and banished tend to go at the moment. So the tendency is to run 3 elites or 2 elites and a brute captain or chosen warrior to get a tactician dice in there. And this is because of that reinforcements, making it so you can bring it back so you have an extra unit. And you can also then stack these elites to the guilds with weapons and equipment and make them very useful when they activate. Added in, because of this reinforcements, you're a lot more willing to let them die. Now that is a detriment in some cases to Husky mode. However, it's also very good for them because they get to come back more, which is good for a lot of objective modes. They're getting that reinforcements, they're getting their items back, and this is another thing with elites, is they make a lot better use of items and two-use weapons such as the Spanker than Spartans would, because they want to die. They also have a liking for continuous fire weapons, because if they can kill themselves by using a gun, even better. Fortunately, but not for the elites and banished players, there was a change where you can no longer target a cube that only has your model in with a frag or grenade weapon. As in Season 0, people did like killing their own elites a lot because of their ability to come back and then take the objective. And it wasn't the greatest feeling for the opponent who'd done everything they could to avoid killing said elites for that exact reason. It's good that that's been changed, but it has hurt the elites a little bit because it was a trick they liked to use a lot, especially with their plasma grenades. Moving into the 4 variants of elite that we have, we're going to start with the most popular one by quite a distance, and that is the sword elite. Why is this the most popular? Why it being the most expensive? Well, it's a sword elite. It has a sword. And as we said, elites have a 4-up fight, and they like going fast and getting into combat. They also have plasma grenades on every one of the models as a base. So even if you put a sword elite in without a pickup weapon, he's at least got some form of ranged weapon, and it's a decent one, and with Sticky on the 4-up, having a decent chance of occurring, can be a very deadly one. However, with this elite, if you throw on him a BR-75 Covenant Carbine, Fuel Rod or Spanker, he is going to have a good time. Especially throwing it in with a grapple and thruster to get him across the board really quickly early, or a grapple and active camo, both of which can be very useful. Now, the thruster is actually very useful on elites. Now, I've mentioned before that I'm not the biggest fan always of the thruster because you can't use it on a respawn, and that means you use the chance you don't get to use it after the first time you've used it. But with elites, because of that reinforcements, meaning that there's a good chance they can come back in after the opponent has no more moves left, they can kind of set up for the next round to be able to use that thruster. So it does still have play. Camo is also a good one because they have a 4-up save, so frag is not going to be the easiest thing to clear one of those shields off them. And adding in, it means they can not get around Snapshot anymore, but make it very hard for Snapshot to do anything with them having a 4-up save and it being -2 dice. It also gives them a little bit of survivability when you want them to, as you can pick when to put that camo on. So if you come in for objective, you can choose to camo them up. If you don't want to camo them up, you can avoid it. It does also mean if that enemy really wants to kill them and put a threat sensor on them and takes the shot with the -2 dice, there's a good chance you're not dying and you will get that evade, which can be quite bad for the opponent. But I think Grapple and Thruster is the better choice most of the time with a sword elite, just because sending that sword into an opponent is what you want to do, and they are deadly. They are a very, very scary unit, and if you're seeing a list with only 2 elites in it, a lot of the time they may just be 2 sword elites. Next up on the list, we have the Plasma Rifle variant. Now, the Plasma Rifle, when it came out in the game before the first season even started while it was still draft, had the long keyword, which did cause it some issues because it wasn't great with that. However, when War Games came out, it was one of the few things they have changed, and that long is no longer on the unit's card on the Plasma Rifle. And that makes it quite a good weapon, because it's equivalent to the MA40 for the most consistent rapid fire weapon in the game, having rapid fire, range 4, and 2 rerolls, but in this case from continuous fire, which would normally make it worse than the MA40 because at least the MA40 doesn't have a chance of hurting yourself. But as we mentioned with elites, they don't mind hurting themselves, and they're on a 4-up save anyway, so it's actually not that common that they do hurt themselves. But what you gain from that is also it has a bit more ability with lethality, as it has AP1 and ESD1, so it has a decent chance of actually doing some damage, unlike the MA40, which has neither. You then also, with elites, have their energy daggers, which is a good add-on for them, and usually something I would say you'd always take, because they're a very good melee unit. And what that is AP2 Lethal 1. So while the Spartans have ESD1 and lets them help get through shields, the elites ones are built around doing extra damage once they get through, and in general are probably the better overall, because once shields have gone down, at least the elite ones still do something extra. And it makes this Plasma Rifle one the same cost as a sword elite, so it's a very big question there of whether you'd want to take it with a dagger over the sword. In truth, it's an ESD2 and AP3 in comparison to the sword, so it's only missing 1 AP there, and the ESD2, so it's not actually dreadfully worse than the sword. But if you're taking them in a small squad and stacking them to the gills, you're probably taking the 2 sword elites first anyway, because you're going to give them a really good gun anyway, so you don't have to really worry about the Plasma Rifle. However, if Snapshot becomes a bit more prevalent, it's a very good gun for getting around that and into melee. Equipment wise, mostly put a few rod of spanker on them rather than a BR or a Covenant Carbine, just because they've already got kind of that style of gun, so giving them that explosive is not too bad of an idea. And then same again, grapple, thruster, active camo. I wouldn't put on anything like explosive ammo because it's not that great of a gun for shooting the Plasma Rifle. So yeah, grapple, thruster and active camo are the choices to go for here. It might just end up being active camo if you're running it as a 3rd elite, with the sword elites already taking both grapples and both thrusters. The next elite variant is the Needler variant. Now this is one that's a bit of an interesting one. It's a good rapid fire weapon because it has weight of fire 1, so it's only 1 worse reroll than the Plasma Rifle, but doesn't have a chance of hurting yourself. But it is 1 range less, being range 3, so overall it's a bit worse. However, it is cheaper at 2 points less, being at 42 points instead of 44. However, it does struggle with lethality a bit more than the Plasma Rifle does, as it lacks any AP or any ESD. It does gain lethal 1, but if it can't get through, then that lethal is redundant. So it's not really a gun you would use to be aggressive. What this elite is more there for is if you need to drop 2 points and still want the rapid fire gun. In regards to weapons and items, it'll be the same as the Plasma Rifle one, fuel rod, spanker, and then the grapple, thruster, active camo, but it is more of a just if you can't afford the Plasma Rifle one in your team, you take this one instead if you want that rapid fire. And the last current released elite variant is the Pulse Carbine, and this is the cheapest of the lot at 40 points, so 7 points less than the Sword Elite, 4 less than the Plasma Rifle, and 2 less than the Needler. And this is the one that has the least utility wise because it doesn't have any pinning or anything like that. It just has a base gun that is very similar to the plasma rifle, but without the continuous fire. Instead only having rate of fire 1, but still having then the ESD 1 and AP 1. So it can do a little bit of damage, but it's nothing great. The main reason you're bringing this elite is if you want to keep the points cheaper so you can fit everything in, and with how Snapshot's not being used that much at the moment, the rapid fire is not that needed, and the elites have plasma grenades at the very least anyway. However, weapon wise, again putting on the energy daggers, and then probably going with either a BR-75 Covenant carbine if you want him to be a bit more long distance shooting, or putting on a Fjord Spanker if you just want him to go in crazy with explosions. Though I would lean more towards the BR-75 Covenant carbine for this unit, because if you're bringing this one, it's probably the third one in the squad, and it gives you that ability to have a bit of range, can either pin up, knock back, and do some defending if you're doing any modes that you want to be doing some defending. And then last off, it's the normal grapple, thrust or active camo. However, also explosive ammo is an option here, because if you're taking the BR-75 or Covenant carbine and it isn't the main one going into melee, it's not a bad idea to have that extra explosive ammo. So you might go active camo and explosive ammo if you wanted on this one, or you could even throw in a threat sense if you really wanted to make him come in and be able to shoot something straight away. So that rounds up the Sangheili Mercenaries. They are an incredible unit, a very scary unit. The unit that I actually won my first Halo Flashpoint tournament with as well, in the last tournament of Halo Flashpoint Draft, which was the Mantic Alpha back in 2025, just before War Games came out. And so they do hold a place in my heart. And I really do actually enjoy playing the elites. They're a very fun unit to use. It's very crazy for your opponent to deal with. And just that fun of going just crazy, flat out, loads of equipment on them, free man, just running around with the knowledge that you possibly have a commander sitting back ready to just bring you back when they kill you. It's just a load of menace that a lot of people don't know how to deal with at the moment because they don't see it that much. So they don't know what to do when it comes out really well against them. And I will admit, it did throw me for a loop and cause me some issues in the recent Nottingham tournament, because I didn't drop a single point on my scores outside of the 2 games against Clive from Mantic, who was running 2 elites and a brute captain, to which it was one of the hardest games of oddball I've played and was very close. And then I lost in Illusion to him, which was also the game where Buck decided to hot drop fail twice in a row. So it wasn't the best luck either there, but it was just horrendous. Anytime my guns would fail, they'd get closer. Yeah, elites, they are a menace. If you don't equip right to go against them, you're going to be in big trouble, especially in certain modes. And when playing them, they're very fun. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if there's anything you disagree with in my thoughts about the unit, or anything you think I missed, please feel free to let me know in the comments. But with that, I've been the Tabletop Fox. I hope you have a lovely day, and ta-ra!